Hey, Mark, you and I are now on stage, but we haven't started yet,
Okay.
so people can hear us.
Oh, I was
Waiting for the countdown.
okay. On this feast of the early Roman martyrs.
All right, I'm going to remove that one and bring us all up. Okay. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening.
And Marie, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Yep. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. So I invited Marie because I knew her through my work with Mary's Advocates Upholding Marriage. I invited Marie to share with viewers her journey as an annulment respondent who believes that she has a valid marriage and she's living as a separated faithful person. So let's get started. Marie, the first thing I ask you to explain to viewers is when you and your husband got married, did you have did you have any kind of intervention with the church, premarital investigation, that kind of thing?
I think it was pretty much status quo. We started dating, and when we decided to get engaged and we approached the church, we signed up for the pre-Cana classes. I believe it was over a period of maybe a month or so. We went a couple of times a week. I really don't recall honestly, any details helping me be truly prepared for what marriage would be like. So I think we just went through the motions because we knew that that's what we were supposed to do as Catholics.
At the time that you were married, were you guys serious Catholics, you and your family, and at least you had models of people who were married for life?
Both our families were Catholic. My family was not practicing Catholics. I would go to church periodically throughout my younger life with actually friends whose parents sort of made them go to church. So, and my husband's family, they were very active in the church. My father-in-law did a lot of volunteer work at the church. My mother-in-law worked there. They had family friend who was a priest who was always at the home anytime I went there. So you were expected to attend mass. So I became more involved in my faith when we started dating and got married, and then after we had children.
How about were there any divorces on either side in the ancestry with you and your husband?
My husband, sibling, one of his brothers, got divorced probably about 6 or 7 years into my marriage, and he was only married for probably 6 or 7 years before he got a divorce. And he had 3 children. He has 3 children. But on my side, I have a very small family, and there was actually my mother's sister, but we weren't really close to her, but she did get divorced.
But your mom and dad stayed together, and your husband's mom and dad stayed together.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then moving into the next period of what we like to ask people about before we get into the annulment business. What was your marriage like before it hit a crisis? Big crisis, I mean.
Yeah, right.
Crises.
So probably, I think I consider it was a good marriage. Right away, 2 years into our marriage, my son was born. So I was busy taking care of him. I also worked outside the home. So I had some daycare issues. 2 years after that, my daughter was born, my second daughter. So we were just busy sort of living our lives, doing a lot of home improvement projects. As I said, my husband had a big family, so we would do a lot of activities, with his family. And then in 2003, my youngest daughter was born. So that's sort of when the dynamic changed for me, I guess. My daughter was born with some hearing issues. She wears hearing aids. So it was a lot of labor intensive to, take care of her. I was working full time. My husband was traveling a lot for work. So I found it very stressful. My father had just passed away. We had a very close relationship. I had to take care of my mother. She was not able to really sort of live on her own, pay her own bills, whatnot. So I had to help her. So I just was really sort of, I guess, stressed out. And when I was at work, unfortunately, looking back, I call it the perfect storm. I met someone that I became involved with, and I had an affair with this person, on and off. I'm sorry for.
Interject a question.
Sure.
About how long into your marriage before that happened?
About 12 years.
Okay.
That I met him. Right. So it was on and off for, quite a while. But it really, I sort of had, maintained my life with my family. It was fine. I would go, actually, I went a year or two without seeing this other person. It was just really a sort of a bizarre relationship. But anyway, I decided 2017. So I just needed to stop this. I needed to devote my, honor my marriage vows, honor my husband, my family.
And
So
when you say stop this, you mean stop the relationship with the guy that had I don't know, slipped into an adulterous relationship. That's the relationship you needed to stop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
and I was unable to, it went on as long as it did, unfortunately, because this person was, I believe he's got mental health problems. He was threatening me. So I finally figured I would just come clean and tell my husband. So I did. In 2017, I was immediately asked to leave the home. I lived with my brother for about 6 months. And then my husband asked me we started counseling as well during that time. First counselor, we said, the very first time we met with this person, said, I can't help you, you need to get a divorce. We were in the room for maybe 2 minutes. I think he just was looking at body language or something. It really was disappointing. I said, can we please get another counselor? So we got another counselor who I didn't really find to be very helpful either. Just, telling me I needed to peel the onion. That's all I remember. So anyway, my husband did invite me to move back into the home, which I did. And I thought things were going okay. I guess, through now years of therapy, I've learned I need to be more, open with my feelings and tell people what I believe is wrong. I did not do that, which caused a problem in my marriage. So it was a communication issue. So we tried, we were traveling. I thought things were going well. My husband would still get very angry at me, for my actions, understandably so, but it was sort of a constant. And I came home one day and he just said, I want a divorce and I'm seeing somebody else.
Can you pause a sec here too? Because when you and Mark and I were talking a couple days ago, there's a time lapse between you confessed to him that this adulterous affair had occurred at some point in the past. And then he was really distraught and he's like, you got to leave the house. So you agreed, I guess, and you moved in with your brother for a time, but then you came back. So from the time that your husband and you came back home, well, I guess when you did come back home, what was your understanding of your husband's plan at that point moving forward? Were you like, what was your understanding of what was the plan when you moved back home regarding your family staying together or not staying together at that time?
Right. I guess I thought that we would, looking back, we didn't really have an actual plan. We just thought we sort of resumed our life as husband and wife.
Okay.
Again, going out, doing the things that we always did. I remember friends, saying, wow, your husband's a saint to taking you back. And so, as I said, things would go okay, but then he would have moments where he would sort of relapse into loathing me or, not liking me anymore. So I just thought, well, so then I had started researching different organizations that help people that have been impacted by infidelity. That and watching podcasts, and I realized there's a lot of people out there who have been affected by this issue, and you can work through it. You can work through it. But when my husband told me he wanted a divorce, and I told him I wanted to go to one of these programs, he just said, "I'm not spending that kind of money. I can't. It's over."
How long were you home again? Because I'm thinking from your children's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So they know something's terribly wrong when mom moves in with their uncle. So they don't know what the future holds. And then when mom moves back home and you're kind of appearing like you're doing the things that you're used to doing, I'm thinking from a kid's perspective, it's like, whew, we made it through that. Mom's home again and our life is normal. So how long was it from the time you moved back home to where he announced, I'm getting a divorce?
Probably about, it was close to a year, about 10 months. But I think, as I said, he would be fine. It was sort of this odd thing where he would just wake up, 3 or 4 nights a week and wake me up at midnight and just start, yelling at me. How could you do this to me? So I think he was not able to stop ruminating over my, my actions. So,
hey, Mark, I'm going to ask Mark, do you have any thoughts at this point so far that you think need to be brought up about the situation?
I think it's rather strange to me that he asked you to come back into the home. It was his idea for you to come back, rejoin him in raising your children, being husband and wife again. And you're saying within 10 months
or a year
that he seemed to still bring up the lapse in in your life, the affair in your life. And it just seems odd to me that was he working on forgiving you? Was he getting any help to forgive you?
Or did you guys both go to confession and you knew that God forgave you?
I mean, I knew that God forgave me. My husband did tell me he forgave me. We were seeing separate counselors, and he told me that his counselor said to him, "You'll never understand what your wife did because you would never do that." I don't know how the counselor would know that. I don't know how any human being, every human being is capable of doing things we don't think we can do. But so I think people just sort of fed into that, you wouldn't do that. He, as I've read through in, the annulment testimony, he's very, appearances are very important to him, and he's judgmental, and he writes that down. I'm very judgmental.
So just as an FYI, when I collaborate with someone under the capacity of Mary's Advocates, where I help people uphold their rights in annulment cases, I always tell people, don't break any oaths of confidentiality. And some tribunals require people to take oaths of confidentiality at different parts of the process. So, Marie, for your perspective, we're going to get into this later. You're only free to talk about things that you would have known anyway. You're not free to talk about things that you only learned because you read them in the annulment process. So,
okay, I understand.
Yeah, I mean,
although I that is my opinion of his personality also.
So I agree with you, Mark, because as far as the church is concerned, adultery is a legitimate reason for permanent separation of spouses. However, the church leans towards wanting forgiveness by the party, for the party that didn't commit. So the church would want your husband to forgive you and maintain the marital household for your kids and the culture and everybody else. However, adultery is a grounds for permanent separation of spouses, though it's not a ground forever. If someone commits adultery and 3 years later, the other spouse can't say, well, I'm now deciding I want to be permanently separated from you because you committed adultery and I learned about it 3 years ago. That would be a horrible situation. And that the church recognizes that's a horrible situation. So she says, I think in her wisdom, that if one feels that they have a reason for permanent separation because of adultery, they need to take action on it within 6 months of learning about the adultery. So the fact that your husband asked you to leave, if he was thinking I need to be permanently separated from you, he would have invited you back home. That would have been that. And eventually he could have gone to the church and you would have had your status defined, and, you each would have lived your life as best you can. But because he invited you back home, that opportunity, or that chance, I don't even want to call it an opportunity, but that window closed. So as far as church doctrine and canon law goes, he had 6 months from when he learned about it to make a decision about whether he wants to be permanently separated or not. And he invited you back home. So it's understood that he's intending to act like a normal husband and do the best you can. And so now, can you continue from where you left off? He said he wanted a divorce. You found out about these intensive programs that can help people where adultery had occurred. What did he respond to that? Did you talk to any priest during this time? And what happened basically with the divorce?
Well, I think once he told me he wanted the divorce, and I mentioned this program that I had researched, and it was a few $1,000s. And I think he said, I'm not going to spend that kind of money on you, or something like that. And he said he also said he'd met somebody else, but he denies saying that, at a later date. But anyway, he was, and then I called the priest that I had gone to confession. We both met with the pastor of our church, who our children went to Catholic school. So we became very friendly with the pastor, and so we both met with him for some counseling and confession. And then I think then he called me, the pastor. He said, would you like to have lunch? And I went to have lunch with him, and he said, you realize you need to get divorced, right? And I didn't know what to say. I was like, like, okay. I think when my husband told me I wanted a divorce, I just said, okay. I was like in shock. So I just was really surprised. And he says, if you need to get a divorce, it's okay. He can't get over this. So I just, again, and then I think, as I mentioned earlier, my in-laws family had the previous pastor of the church was a very good friend of theirs, who was always around. I mean, I saw him a couple of months ago. I mean, he's very elderly now, but he co-officiated our wedding. He would have written my husband letters about me. I was really kind of distraught. Nobody reached out to me. Like, how are you? What are you doing? It was almost like, well, we just need to get rid of her. She sinned, and it's okay for you to, get rid of her. That's how I felt. There's another priest too, a friend of his, was in the mix. All these priests that really are not what I find to be pro-marriage at all. So then let's see. So
what about his family?
His father and mother are very good, faith-filled people, especially I loved his father. His father passed away a few years ago, but he said, you need to forgive her. You need to, go back. He used to always tell me what a good mother I was. My father-in-law, really, he was wonderful. And my mother-in-law was a great person too.
Did your father-in-law strongly encourage his son to forgive you?
I think he did. I think it bothered him that he had, one child who was divorced and another one who's going to become divorced. So.
And then I cut you off. I think you were talking about the divorce. He says he needs to get his divorce. And we all know, that with no fault, once somebody says they want a divorce and they go to the state will force a divorce. Is that what happened to you?
Yes. He told me, we could get lawyers and it would cost a lot of money, or we could mediate. So we went the mediation route. Looking back, I probably would not do that again. I'll recommend it to anyone. And when it finally, we went to court in December of 2019. And I remember the judge, there were a few things that concessions I made, the judge was surprised. And I think I was hoping that maybe he would just change his mind. Like, oh, I won't take too much money, or I won't do. And then when it was final, the judge says, do you agree? And I said, no, I do not. I want it on the record. I do not want the divorce.
Very
So, but you don't really have a choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, that's what happened then. And then I would get alerts from, we still had some of the same bank accounts. Every time he would go out on a date, I'd get the alert on my credit card that he's in such and such a restaurant. So I knew he was, on a date. So it was pretty painful. It was a really,
devastating.
Bad. And then he told me I should go on date. My husband told me I should go on dating sites because you can meet some really nice people.
Oh.
So,
do you think that, Marie, do you think anybody with authority, like the priest that was a family friend, or a priest that he was close to, or another mentor Catholic, another friend of his, would caution him not to start dating before the annulment process was even started?
No, I don't think.
Wow.
No, I don't even know if they're aware of that. A lot of people, when I've talked about annulment Catholics, they're very unaware of what is supposed to occur after when people get divorced, if they're Catholic. So, no. So my husband now has had the same girlfriend partner for about 3 or 4 years now, and he lives with her. So.
Wow. Hey, I want to pause a minute to to bring over a comment and talk about this because it's a good thing. Tom says, please direct this lady to Dr. Bacon. Dr. Christine Bacon has herself available as a relationship coach. And I mean, in your situation, if someone had referred you to her back when you first confessed your adultery, maybe your husband would have been a little bit more, he would have forgiven you more permanently. Do you know who Dr. Bacon is? Christine Bacon?
I have seen her, I think like her podcast. I believe similar situation.
Yes.
She was involved in that type of relationship, and she was able to reconcile with her husband. Yeah. I mean, sort of after the fact, I've come across so many resources now that it's too late, but.
Thanks, Tom, for that. Yeah. Had a recommendation for Dr. Christine Bacon as a relationship coach for people who are in trouble.
Yeah.
Mark, do you have anything more to comment about how this divorce went out? I mean, you and I have both gone through it as divorce defendants. You can't stop it, and you have to choose whether to sign some kind of coerced agreement. And when you told the judge, yeah, I really don't want the divorce, I mean, but on paper you say, hey, I agree, we went through mediation. So if outsiders and Catholics think, oh, when a divorce happens, both people agree to the divorce, just because that's what happened on paper doesn't mean that's what really happened. It's that the person is coerced, and their other option is to spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars to have paperwork go back and forth between lawyers.
Right.
And the outcome is contrary to divine law, because if we were following the church's law about adultery, you can't hold someone hostage year after year after year after you've agreed that you've forgiven them for adultery. You can't do that. But the divorce courts don't care about any of that.
No.
So your husband wanted to maybe clean up this situation, and he still wanted at that time, and I think he continues to want to be a good Catholic, even though he's cohabitating, setting a bad example for your children. He's trying to somehow rectify. Would you say? How would you describe?
Regularize is the word. Regularize your situation. So he's cohabiting with somebody who's not his wife. Who cares if you have a divorce? That doesn't matter. I think we're ready to move into the annulment journey. So
He
found out he had grounds or proposed grounds for.
His friend, who was another friend who's a priest that he worked with, told him he needed to get an annulment because he knew he was dating this person. So that was my New Year's present in 2024. That's what I got, you know. So, and my daughter told me, I said something once to one of my older daughters, and I said, gee, you don't think it bothers your dad? He's dating and he doesn't have an annulment? Or no, I didn't even say that. I said that he's dating. And she said, he just needs to get an annulment. That's what Father so-and-so said. He needs to just get an annulment and move on. And it really, I can't talk about it with my children because they have this really skewed view. Actually, it's been almost 2 years since he filed for the annulment. He has never spoken to me about it. He never told me he filed. We don't discuss it if he calls about one of the children. But I just, you know, got it, opened the mail one day, and there it was. So
okay, so when you got your notification that a tribunal is going to investigate whether your marriage is valid, some tribunals don't send the respondent what they're supposed to send them. In your situation, did you get mailed a letter that included something signed by your husband where he describes the grounds, that is the law-based reasoning canon law, even in non-technical terms, he describes the grounds. And then did he give any basis in fact, something unique to you and your relationship upon which he's relying to support these alleged grounds? Did you at least get those two things in your first letter?
he did. I believe that's the libellus. Is that correct?
Yeah. They're supposed to mail it. They're supposed to mail you a copy of his libellus, which just means little book in Latin. So petition and libellus, I use them interchangeably. Go ahead. So it did.
I did receive that.
And what grounds and basis? What grounds did he allege? I mean, in your own words, or and what facts do you know that he's alleging? Did he?
I mean, can I read this or?
Well,
I mean,
when you got mailed that letter, it just got mailed to you. There's
that's
no
right.
You didn't sign any oath of confidentiality before they gave you that letter, right?
Correct. Right.
Yeah. So
it says, before and during my marriage to the respondent, I occasionally made it clear that my marital vows were extremely important to me. The respondent was well aware of my intention and will, but remained unfaithful during our marriage. Her behavior was kept secretly from me until she disclosed her relationship in 2017, which was 24 years after our marriage.
So the thing that's of interest is what facts did he allege that you remained unfaithful during the marriage?
Yeah, it remained, which to me means just remained, like forever. We go before, during, after, like.
Yeah, so I guess that means like the week before. Well, yeah, remained. That means continually. So I guess the week before, I mean, that could mean, you know, on your honeymoon, you were still having adulterous partnering with the person you were fornicating with the week before the marriage. Like, but at least you knew that. So that's all you had to go by. And then I cut you off before I wanted to make that point about those were the facts that you had, those alleged facts. And then he referenced something that was the 2017 thing, which was way after the marriage when you told him about this affair that you need to end and you want to end. What about the grounds?
The grounds were defective consent by reason of partial simulation in an intention to exclude fidelity on the part of the respondent, or error concerning the equality of the person directly and principally intended on the part of the petitioner.
Okay, for people who need us to review that, like, what was that? That was all technical gobbledygook. Simulation is when you're faking something, you're simulating, you know. So simulating consent, you can fake your marriage consent and you can fake a certain aspect of it. So he alleged that you faked your promise to be faithful, fidelity. You faked it when you promised fidelity. And then this other thing is error of person, where a victim of a perpetrator can say, whoa, that perpetrator tricked me into thinking that they had this quality that was super, super important to me. And it's the reason I married them is because of that quality. So so that's what you see is the grounds. Okay, at least that's a fair beginning. And the only general facts you have is that you remained unfaithful during the marriage. Okay, so that's how it started. Oh,
should
okay.
Yeah.
Was there any then? We talked about this before. You went live with listeners, and one of the things that we wanted to talk about was this business of a tribunal telling someone to instruct a different person to represent them as their alter ego, which is title of a procurator. From the
Correct.
beginning, did you get a letter like that? Did you get some form that told you sign this thing,
Yes.
mandating somebody?
Yes, the tribunal mandated a priest in the diocese to be my procurator advocate.
Did they tell you, hey, by the way, we're appointing this person? Or did they give you a pre-printed form and say, oh, we're instructing you to sign this pre-printed form? So on paper, just like in divorce court, they have a record that you voluntarily appointed this person for yourself.
They did. I think initially it was in one of the forms that I signed that I sort of overlooked, that I agreed to have this priest be my procurator advocate.
And that's something that I point out to people who contact me, that a lot of times these tribunals instruct you to well, on paper, it looks like you voluntarily mandated for yourself both the advocate who's an expert in canon law, and you mandated for yourself a procurator whose role is to speak on your behalf about all sorts of procedural things. So that's important to your journey. I want to make that point.
Now, is this after she answered the questionnaire? I'm assuming that you got a questionnaire in the mail, Marie.
Right. I believe that was before I answered the questionnaire.
Okay. All right.
And then when you did answer a questionnaire, was it a question only about these alleged facts of whether you remained faithful during the marriage, or was it a questionnaire about everything?
It was about everything. The things I thought were relevant to my marriage, but.
And you did name witnesses. Did you learn from the witnesses whether their questionnaires were specific to the alleged fact of you remained unfaithful during the marriage, or did they also have questionnaires that were about everything?
They had, I think they were about 5 or 6 pages, a lot of lengthy questions about my family, my parents, my husband's family and parents, questions that they would really have no knowledge of how to answer, even if they wanted to.
Okay.
And I don't know what the relevance would be anyway.
One of our heroes is Dr. Robert Vasoli. He was a professor at University of Notre Dame, and he published this hardcover book by at Oxford University Press. And he talks about the fishing expedition. Tribunals collect answers to lengthy questionnaires to go on fishing expeditions to find some facts that they can put on grounds. So I think that covers your original citation, the questionnaires in general. And then after they collected testimony comes the next phase. And can you tell us about your journey of when it was your turn to go read the record of the case while keeping the oath of confidentiality? We're not asking you anything about what did you read in the testimony that you didn't already know, but what happened with the procedures?
Well, I was going back and forth with the secretary of the Archdiocese just on, I wanted to have this priest that was appointed as my procurator advocate. On Mary's Advocate's advice, I renounced him as the procurator. I just wanted him to be my advocate to help me. And the Archdiocese would not allow that. I got a few letters from them. And then they would, they ignored some of my emails. So finally I set up an appointment to go and review the acts. And I was given a 2-hour time limit, which again, on Mary's Advocate's advice, and understandably so, there's a lot to read. So I submitted a letter with the exception to the 2-hour time limit. I live near the Archdiocese, so I would bring a lot of these rather than send them certified. And if I made any changes to any form, the secretary wouldn't accept it. And I said, I'm not asking you to approve it. I just want you to accept it. And I'm
Is
just,
Is
you know,
this like if you were the UPS man or the postman and you were delivering something, you just want proof of delivery?
correct. But
So she wouldn't even let you send it. So you had to send
no.
it through some other way anyway to get proof of delivery.
So yes, I think I had to leave and go to the post office and, you know, send it. And then I was, I think that day I remember I was very upset, and I think I was snippy with the poor woman, and I think I started to cry. And I said to her, well, it doesn't matter. This annulment will be granted anyway because you grant all of them. And she just looked at me and said, no, we don't. That's, you know, we take this very seriously. And then she ended up emailing me to tell me one of the judges wanted to meet with me to just, I guess it was maybe to console me or something. It's a little off-putting. And I did not meet with the judge. I didn't, you know, think that would be appropriate. Maybe it was just an act of kindness, but it was strange. So I went, I think it was a week or two later, read the acts, you know, was told I could take notes, make copies of anything. I've asked a few times, I hope you're not writing things like verbatim what you're reading well, I was doing the best I could to, you know, so that I could refute whatever. The acts was also the witness statements. Would that have been included in the acts? I'm sorry, I get confused. There's so much paperwork.
Then both parties are invited to come into a tribunal and read the full record of the case that they've collected thus far. So that would be all the testimony from both parties. And then you have a chance to submit rebuttal proofs, because the way the canon law works is that, you know, you first get a citation with a copy of your husband's petition, which says in a general way, which you knew was remained unfaithful during the marriage. That was his assertion. And then you go read the record of the case. And Dignitas Connubii does say that the judges can ask you to take an oath or a promise to only use the information you learn during the reading of the testimony. The judge can ask you to promise to only use that information for the purpose of upholding your marriage. So if you were to tell the world on a YouTube podcast what you learned in there that you had no idea about before, okay, that is not for the purpose of upholding your marriage. But what I'm asking you to do here is just explain your journey and some of the procedural hiccups. And, you know, I'm hearing you say, I had a 2-hour time limit. Oh, and whatever happened with the advocate, the priest that you said, I don't want to be my procurator, but my advocate, they finally just said, no, he's not allowed to be either.
They just said nothing. I said, well, he was away. And I said, so can I schedule my time to come when he's back? And it just they just sort of ignored me. So I thought, he's not coming because since he's not my procurator, they're not going to just allow him to just be my advocate.
And the benefit of an advocate is the tribunal can never give a party a copy of all the testimony, but a tribunal can give an advocate a copy of all of that. So as a party was trying to prepare her completion of the proofs, she could have conversations with the advocate, be like, hey, you know, I noted that such and so witness said thus and so. Can you look at that? I was thinking of responding like this. Can you help me here? And the advocate has all that information. So there is a benefit to having an advocate when it comes to trying to figure out how to respond to the proofs. And that's his job. But that kind of just got dropped through. And this will come up later when you finish your journey. I want to pause here for a comment. MM and Mark and Marie, see if you can help me figure out what MM is getting to. I feel like everything I read, I have already heard my husband clean the last how many years since he decided to separate from me. What could MM be getting at? Already heard my husband clean the last how many years since he decided to separate from me. Maybe she's asking about separation cases in the church at all, because if someone wants to use the ground of adultery for a case of separation of spouses, there is a time limit. But if someone wants to use danger, like it's an extremely dangerous situation, I'm being abused, you can't use that when the danger is over. It's like if the danger is an ongoing thing, then yeah, you'd have a reason to be separated from the person, and you might go to the church to ask for intervention or ask for help in reconciling if they can use a pro-marriage good counselor and direct people that go to good confessions. But you can't claim a grounds for separation when there's no present action that leads to the grounds. If you want to rewrite that MM so that we can address it better, we'll bring it back. So then I think, so you completed your proofs. You wrote some responses to what you had read when you read the testimony of your husband and the witnesses. And then what happened?
I think
Did they give you, like they make their decision eventually. So when they made their decision, what did you get notified about?
I was notified that the annulment was granted, and I was found, I guess, I say guilty of one of the
Yeah, but don't bother giving us which one, because
charges. Okay, but not the other.
okay.
So I was a little confused as to how they came to their conclusion, and I disagreed with some of the facts in the decision.
When you first got your letter, the law says that countdowns for appealing don't start until you get your own copy of the full decision. In your tribunal, did they mail you a full copy of their decision that showed all of their rationale? Or
No,
did they just mail you something different?
No, they just mailed me a one-page statement that said the annulment was granted.
And did they say, hey, we'll give you a copy upon request. Let us know if you want us to mail you a copy?
No, they did not.
Are you talking about the final sentence summary? Okay.
Well, the final, it's called the full definitive sentence. I mean, it's one thing to just write you a letter that says, hey, we gave your husband the annulment for this ground, end of story. And, oh, you have 15 days to lodge your appeal to let us know that you want to appeal. That's one thing. It's another thing to mail you a full copy of the definitive sentence that has to go through the facts of the case. Like this witness said that, and the husband said that, and the wife said this, and this ground said that, and the meaning for the ground is that. It's a description of the meaning of the grounds, and then it's a description of how the facts of your situation, citing testimony, support the grounds. It's the rationale. So, Marie, they mailed you a letter saying, we gave the annulment for these grounds, and they told you about appeal? But did they tell you you can get your own copy? No.
They did not, no. I think I only became aware through Marriott's advocates that I was entitled to, I'm just looking at the letter. It just said, the decree of publication of the sentence notes you have the right to lodge an appeal against the decision, but it doesn't tell me that I have the right to view the what is it? The sentence, the definitive.
Did either one of those, when you got that notice, did anything on there say that you could come view it in any way whatsoever? Like, could you go to a tribunal and read it? Because I've seen prior to the 1983 code, there was an option for a tribunal to say, hey, you know what? If you want to know what the sentence is about, come into our tribunal and you can read it here. Did they at least give you that option in that first letter?
No, I'm looking at it right here. It just says this is to advise you the decision was made in the affirmative. The enclosed decree of publication of the sentence notes you have the right to lodge an appeal within 15 working days.
On their formal decree that was enclosed, was that formal decree say about coming in and reading the sentence?
Nope.
I don't mean like the letter, because sometimes when tribunals send you stuff, you'll get a cover letter that's kind of a summary thing.
I don't see, I have my notebook and I put things in date order, and I do not see that. It just says you can file an appeal, but it doesn't say you can come in and read it, or we'll send you a copy until I ask for it.
Well, when we were talking the other day with you and me and Mark, I remembered you saying you were looking at the decree itself, and there was some sentence in there somewhere in the decree itself, or maybe it was the letter itself saying you could let us know if you wanted to view it. I don't remember your exact words. Maybe you're just not finding it right now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Well, the reason
I
I'm
don't know.
being so nitpicky about this topic is because the law says that when a tribunal issues their final definitive sentence, which is a long document that shows their basis in law and how they analyze the facts to come up with a conclusion, the law says that they can give that final definitive sentence either to a procurator or to a party, and that counts as publishing the act of the publishing the acts. So a question I have is the practice in your tribunal to get everybody to sign what looks like a volunteer mandate of someone to be the procurator, and they mail a respondent that on their very first notification. So then they have in their paper record, hey, respondent Marie mandated Mr. So-and-so as a procurator. And then months later, when it comes time to publish the sentence to the parties, they never give the party their own copy of the sentence because their practice is, oh, everyone has a procurator because we told them to get one. They had to. And then they just give the procurator the full definitive sentence, and they've got a paper trail. And they've never told you that you have a right to receive your own copy, but you're the anomaly because you're the one that own internet research and you read stuff about the difference between a procurator and an advocate, and you're going to the tribunal and submitting letters saying, I'd really be happy to have this guy be my advocate, but I don't want him to be my procurator, and they wouldn't let you do that. So that's why I make such a big issue of that.
Right.
So
I mean, I think I remember emailing with the procurator advocate, that priest. And I think I told him, I never spoke to him. I emailed him some of my concerns that I wouldn't be, privy to some things. And I think he was like, oh, that's absolutely not true. I would never keep anything from you, or something to that effect in his email. But there's no, he doesn't have to abide by that.
And he's not the boss. The tribunal is the boss. He worked for the tribunal. I mean,
Right.
There's an article by Cormac Burke, a judge at the Roman Rota, where he talks about transparency in cases, and he describes a situation where a tribunal told a procurator, you're not allowed to give a copy of the sentence to the party himself. Like, okay, why, what? And this is just their policy all around. I wanted to, when you did, so you knew from your own research that you could get a copy of the sentence. So you asked them for it, and did they just mail you one, or did they ask you to do something else before they give it to you?
I had to go and pick it up. They arranged a time that it said it had to be delivered through a secure method, and they didn't trust the post office, so I agreed to go and pick it up.
And then when you picked it up, did they just hand it to you, or did they give you some kind of constraint?
They gave me a paper to sign that said I wouldn't disclose anything in the documents they were giving me, but I asked for a copy of what I was signing, and they would not give me a copy of what I signed.
What do you think about that, Mark?
I mean, so that's just basic procedure. You always allow someone to get signed copies of what they signed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you sign an agreement. Mark, you sign an agreement, but you can't get a copy of the agreement. So how are you supposed to know what you agreed to?
Right.
But it had something to do with confidentiality.
Yes.
See,
yeah.
One of the problems I see about making you sign an oath of confidentiality, in an appeal, one of the options an appellant has is to give the appeal tribunal new proofs. And I heard from a very trustworthy source that one of the few canon lawyers that represents parties at the Signatura has instructed a party to get an affidavit from a witness. So if your tribunal had information in their sentence that was blatantly false, or you had never seen it before, and you're like, wait a minute, I'd never seen this before. Well, I guess if it was blatantly false, or it was exaggerated, or it was taking something out of context, and you knew that your friend Billy Bob could attest that this alleged fact is false, and this would be new proofs. If you wanted to get an affidavit from Billy Bob to give to the appellate tribunal, you're not allowed to talk to Billy Bob about the case. So how are you going to get an affidavit from Billy Bob? The tribunal says XYZ, and Billy Bob knows that's absolutely false. How are you supposed to be talking to Billy Bob about XYZ if you're sworn to an oath of confidentiality about the sentence? And another issue, a question I have about it is the law does require, the law gives the judge discretion about secrecy, but that's during the proceeding of the case. Where does the judge find the law that supports his moral authority to swear someone, to make someone have an oath of secrecy for the rest of their lives about something? Where does he find that in the law? I mean, there is a principle, it's Canon 220, I think, that, you don't have none of us have the right to defame someone's character, and someone has right to their good name. But if you wanted to go to Billy Bob to get an affidavit about a fact that was alleged in a case, that has nothing to do with hurting your husband's reputation. That has to do with supporting the truth. So that was something that I find unfair.
Frustrating.
There you go.
Elizabeth has a comment, a question, I should say.
Okay, let me bring up Elizabeth's question. This is the one that says, can you clarify?
Yeah.
You want to read it?
The difference between a procurator and an advocate.
Sure. An advocate is supposed to be an expert in canon law, either have a doctorate or be recognized as an expert by the diocese. They can write a legal opinion, kind of like a legal brief, before the judge makes his decision. They're allowed to be present when witnesses are questioned. If witnesses are questioned in the tribunal, which is the default of how they're supposed to be questioned, they're allowed to have copies of the record of the case during the whole thing. So when the husband, every time a testimony comes in, the tribunal can mail a copy of that to the advocate in the beginning as these come in prior to. So these are all roles that an advocate have. A procurator is like a power. I use the phrase alter ego. They can speak on your behalf about procedural things. So if the tribunal issues a decree that says, hey, it's your turn to come read the record of the case, a procurator could say, nah, I don't want to. My party wants to skip that. Or a procurator is kind of like, this example I use is if I was a bishop in charge of a big diocese and I had some tribunal matter and I'm just too busy, I don't want to spend the time on this, I can delegate someone to be my procurator so they can submit some kinds of procedural things and receive things on my behalf. Or say you're traveling, say you have a job that has you traveling a lot and you can't get mail at your address. Well, maybe you're like, you know what? I want you to mail it to my procurator person so you can mail stuff to him and then he'll give it to me and we can correspond. So that's some of the differences. And on Mary's Advocate's website, on our page about annulment, if you look at the table of contents, I am giving in my own words as best as I can describe something that was in There's a big, thick green hardcover book about Dignitas Connubii, norms and commentary, that was originally published in a foreign language and translated into English. And that's where I'm getting what I'm talking about.
The procurator never has to inform the respondent, in this case, what he does. He's not required to consult.
Right, he's not required to. And if the way the law is, Dignitas Connubii says a procurator could do something on behalf of the party, and so long as the mandate of the procurator is still in effect, the party can't take it back. It's too late. So I always tell people, unless you'd be willing to bet your marriage on this person and put them and trust them with your marriage, you don't want a procurator.
No. And we have about 6 minutes.
Okay, thanks for that question, Elizabeth.
And another person asked about, Marie, if you plan to abide by your own conviction that your marriage, you're operating right now that your marriage is valid, but are you going to continue, regardless of the outcome of the annulment process, to remain faithful to your husband?
Yeah. And is this the question you're looking at, Mark?
Yeah.
If your appeal comes back?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, Marie, you did appeal. So you sent an appeal with your reasons for appeal.
Right.
You're waiting for the ROTA to get back to you about whether this oath of confidentiality is legit and whether even their finding was real.
Right. I mean, at this point, it's been 8 years since I guess my marriage blew up, and I have not. At this point in my life, I plan on remaining a separated, faithful person.
But do you, in your heart, do you have any personal conviction that there's evidence of nullity of your marriage?
Oh, you mean, does Marie believe that she remained unfaithful during the duration?
Right. No, I didn't. I mean, my husband's looking back at some incidents that occurred before we were engaged that he put in the.
Well, you can't tell us anything about that unless you already knew it.
So, I mean, there's some, gray areas in my past, maybe before I was married, that were probably wrong. I look at it as sort of splitting hairs, and I don't think I think it was interpreted incorrectly. But I mean, I think my husband just really wanted. Unfortunately, he wanted out. He was referencing the Old Testament. It allows me to get a divorce. I think he was, looking through the Bible, looking for ways to end the marriage.
But I think you're. Excuse me, Marie. I think your husband's motivated, extremely motivated, because now he has a new girlfriend. He has a new paramour, object of interest.
Right.
And that's what's behind it, I think. He wants so desperately to eventually, I would assume, marry this woman in the church. And he's seeking a green light, get out of jail free card, if you will, from the church so he can do. Would that be accurate to say that you think that's his primary motivation?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Are you still, but are you at all conflicted though with your conviction and your motivation that, as far as I could tell from you, you were faithful to your husband from the word go. When you consented to him, you had no intention of cheating on him. You didn't. That wasn't even in the picture. I would think that you had that in mind on your wedding day.
No, I did not.
Just because you fell from grace one time, and you repented of it, you've gone to confession. As far as you are concerned, you would never do it again. And what I'm sensing from you is that, hey, I don't have evidence of nullity. Why should I? I mean, I'm going to allow the Roman Rota. I guess you have already appealed it. The Roman Rota is going to review the case, but I have trouble figuring out how the Roman Rota is going to approve of the evidence that your local tribunal found. But I still, what do you think?
And you know what? We're going to let Marie have the last word because our time is up. And also, Marie, what is your heart towards your husband?
I mean, I still love my husband. I want my family back. I just want my family back. And
you're waiting.
Bless your children too. You want to bless your children as well.
Right. And I know I don't think it's going to happen because of the hardness of my husband's heart, but I still pray for him. Now I got to work on getting myself to heaven since I don't have a partner to do that.
Thank you.
And I find, I guess the last thing I want to say is that I don't feel that the church, the clergy, when I go to confession and I tell them what's going on, they say, but annulment's so healing. It's so healing. For who, for me, it's not, but for some people, I'm sure it is. And, I just think and as a divorced person, I'm allowed to go and get communion, but I don't feel like there's any support for divorced individuals in the church. The archdiocese, when they have divorce weekend, it's very, you can go meet somebody new. That's sort of the gist of it. Push the annulments through and just move on with your life. And some people can do that, and that's what they want to do. And God bless them. But
thank you, because you're giving a perspective that isn't heard very much, I'm afraid. I'm going to answer one last question. Did Marie ever, was Marie ever appointed a procurator? And the answer, in the end, there was no. They gave up. They just dropped it. You never got a notification that there was a procurator appointed for you, nor an advocate.
Correct.
And
It
with
was,
that,
but-
we need to sign off because those who are part of Mary's Advocates have something else that they do at 9 o'clock Eastern. So thanks,
Right.
Mary. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone who joined and gave our comments. We hope we're moving the needle towards supporting marriage.
Right. Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah.